talking about? Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
No, Jim Moore, we're not kidding you whatsoever. We are talking playoffs. We're talking about college football playoff. And for the first time ever, college football is going to see them effective this year. Say goodbye to the computers, the USA Today coaches poll, and the Harris poll. Those things are history when deciding a national championship for real. Matter of fact, those things are over in terms of deciding who's going to play for the national championship. It's going to be a committee of 13 people, highlighted by Jeff Long, the athletic director at Arkansas. He's the chairperson. He, along with 12 other people, including Condoleezza Rice, that Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State, former Secretary of State and Sanford Provost, along with a cast of others, including Nebraska AD Tom Osborne, from West Virginia AD Oliver Luck, also former Notre Dame, Stanford, and Washington coach Tyrone Willingham, and you also can throw in Archie Manning. Of course, I think you know who his sons are that play in the NFL. And you could also throw in a former 3-star general in the mix. And you can also throw in a former USA Today media member, a longtime college football writer for that paper for over 30 years. So it's going to be a diverse cast, to say the least, that will make up this committee. And again, the college football national championship will no longer be just one game. It's going to be a playoff format. And it's going to look something like this, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. What you're seeing right now, New Year's Day. Those are the 2 bowl games that for this year is part of that rotation. The New Year's 6. The Rose and the Sugar are fortunate enough that they will be the original semifinal host. When you look back in history, and somebody says, okay, what 2 bowl games hosted the first ever national semifinal for college football? You can tell them the Rose Bowl and the Sugar. It'll be 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. We don't know which of the seedings go to which game because it is basically conducted to which team is number 1. For example, if Florida State or Alabama should be number 1, we play at the Sugar. If it's, let's say, UCLA or Oregon, it'd be played at the Rose, okay, because of the geography criteria right there, for example. So the winners of those games move on to the national championship. Losers are done. The winners would play 11 days later from New Year's Day to January 12th. The championship site, that was bidded upon. It has nothing to do with the New Year's 6. The championship sites had to be bid submitted. A competition, I'm sure a fierce one, and it was determined months ago. Arlington, Texas, that's right, Jerry Stadium, AT&T Stadium, where the Dallas Cowboys play. It will host the national championship that night, January the 12th. Dr. Pepper is a sponsor of it. Of course, ESPN will have that game, the semifinal games, and the other 4 of the New Year's 6 games that are not a part of the semifinals. ESPN paid over $7 billion for the exclusive rights to the playoffs, to the championship game, and to those bowl games that for that particular year are not a part of the semifinals but are still considered major games, which we'll talk about in a second. They have this contract for the duration of the playoffs, which go all the way to at least 2025. And although it's 4 teams right now, there is room for, I guess you could say, weeble-wobbling, where they could be lenient, where they can basically change it at some point. And I have a feeling they're going to do that to where they could add more teams to the playoff. We'll see how it works with 4. So this year it's the Rose and the Sugar with the semifinals, and Arlington, Texas hosts the national championship. And that essentially is the meat and potatoes. That's pretty much it as far as the format of it. Now, the committee itself, okay, how often do they get together? At least 10 times this year, okay? Grapevine, Texas is where they'll be gathering most of the time, at a hotel in Grapevine, Texas. And late October, October 28th on a Tuesday is when they'll release their first top 25. They'll have top 25 polls 7 times. The first 6 to me don't mean a whole lot because those are not set in stone, and they will change for a lot of the teams as the year goes along because of records and, of course, because of strength of schedule as well. Probably more so than we've seen in the past with the AP and the coaches poll and even the Harris poll to a certain extent. Now, remember December the 7th. That's the 7th and final poll on a Sunday. Now, on a Sunday, the day after the regular season's over. That December 7th poll is the finale, and it is set in stone. Of their top 25, the committee's top 25, it's the top 4 that will make the semifinal. 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. And, of course, number 5 and probably number 6 are going to cry foul, say, we should be in the playoff, okay? We should be there. Look, this thing is going to be controversial, okay? It's going to make some people upset. No system that you're ever going to have is going to make everybody happy. But I'd rather have a playoff system than have it the way we've had it before with the computers and with so many coaches who don't even watch the games voting on this thing. Who knows if even the coaches for those teams are actually voting? Maybe it's their assistant coaches, their interns, or somebody named Stanley from that school voting who probably doesn't even have any affiliation with the coaches. Who knows? And the Harris poll is voted on by over 100 people, and I don't know how legitimate all those people are when it comes to voting. So this committee of 13 has a major responsibility. They are supposed to go by the following criteria. Win-loss record. Okay? Basically, unless there's a ton of parity, like we had in 2007 with LSU winning the national title with more than 1 loss, if you lose 2 games, 98% chance you're not going to see the national semifinal. There's going to have to be a lot of parity for that to happen. So 10-2, you're pretty much going to be out the door. Conference strength, this is where the SEC, the Southeast Conference, is going to have a big advantage because they'll have so many teams like they always do in the top 20. Auburn, Alabama, we know will be in the top 5. South Carolina is going to be in the top 10. Georgia, they're going to have a bounce back year. They'll be in the top 15. Bet your bottom dollar on that. So will LSU. And Missouri's going to be flirting, with the top 25. So will A&M. And if Florida can get out of their funk from last year, they'll be a factor for that top 25 as well. That's 8 of the 14 teams that I've mentioned alone. And I haven't even talked about Ole Miss or Mississippi State. They're not slouches either. They can play football as well. And Tennessee, recruiting-wise, they're getting better. They just haven't put it all together yet. So that right there is a loaded conference. They play wars in that league. The environments are the loudest, and the battles are some of the best. So conference strength, SEC has a tremendous advantage. And there's nothing at all, according to this committee, that says only 1 team per major conference can get in. So you could have multiple teams from a conference get in if that conference is tough enough and having far better of a year than the other leagues. And by the way, speaking of leagues, this thing really is just eligible for 64 teams plus Notre Dame and maybe BYU if they're having an undefeated year and all the chips fall where they may for the Cougars, okay? ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, those are the 5 conferences, the major conferences, the money conferences. They're the ones that are eligible for this. The group of 5 conferences, they're getting screwed on this thing. The Mid-American Conference, the American Conference, Conference USA. Also, too, you throw in the Sun Belt League as well. So you have those conferences. And I'll go over it one more time as far as the group of 5, just in case you got lost. Conference USA, the Mid-American, the Mountain West, the American Sun Belt, and any independents who are not Notre Dame and maybe to a certain extent BYU. However, there will be one automatic bid for a conference champion from the group of 5 for one of the 4 bowls that year is not a part of the rotation. Okay, for the semifinals, which this year will be the Cotton. Yes, the Cotton Bowl does get 2 major bowls, one New Year's morning right before the semifinals, and of course January the 12th for the national championship. The other 3 bowls, which will be New Year's Eve, by the way, will be the Fiesta, the Orange, and the Chick-fil-A Peach. And by the way, the committee has a responsibility as well to fill in the other spots for the other bowl games that are not part of the semifinal. With the exception if there are any conference tie-ins that automatically have to go there. If they're not, the committee will have to fill in those spots as well. So, talk about strength of schedule. That's a very big one right there, and the committee's already said now more than ever, any other format that's been presented to college football before, strength of schedule will be big, okay, outside of the conference. So, That's where Michigan State, I think, is going to be benefited big time because of the fact that they will play at Oregon in September. And I think Michigan State, as long as they don't get blown out in Eugene, it can take care of business in the Big Ten, which is a tall order, but if they can, and let's say go 12-1, if their only loss was at Oregon, then my goodness, they're going to figure into that national championship semifinal running for the playoffs and a win at Oregon. And hey, that there is just pure gravy, and that could actually benefit them even if they were to lose one game in the Big Ten. Stanford's going to have a loaded schedule as well. That schedule for them might be too loaded. And, of course, we'll have team-by-team previews of quite a few college football teams coming up in July, so check that out. My Sooners, I wish that their conference schedule outside of the Big 12 was tougher, but, again, you schedule these things so many years out in advance, you just never know. I mean, who knew that Tennessee would be in the state that they're in right now? And that's right now looking like Oklahoma's toughest opponent. And that, by the way, is in Norman in mid-September. Their other two opponents are La Tech and Tulsa, and that's not going to, that's not going to impress anybody from the committee. And then conference championships. You don't necessarily have to win your conference to get into that college football playoff, but it doesn't hurt either. And that could be one of those tie-breaking things between, 2 or 3 teams that are vying for that third and or fourth spot to get to the playoff. And that could be one of those overwhelming factors for those committee members. If we're to look, by the way, if you're kind of playing one fun game before we wrap this thing up as far as the college football playoff goes, let's kind of look at last year, okay? What would the committee have done if this had been 2013? In other words, how would they have seeded the teams? Okay, to kind of give you an example. Okay, let's say that this thing had started a year earlier. Well, Florida State was the only unbeaten major team in college football, so I got to think they would have been number 1. The number 2 seed, I would have imagined, would have been Auburn. They were 12-1. Their last 2 wins were against Alabama and Missouri, both top 5 teams. In the case of Alabama, number 1 in the country. So I got to think Auburn would have been 2. I got to think Alabama would have been 3, which would have meant 2 teams from the SEC. Remember, Alabama was the defending national champions, number 1 almost the entire year until that last game against Auburn. And remember, Alabama got beat on the final play of the game. They tried to make that long field goal. Give credit to Auburn for sending Davis back in that situation in the end zone just in case the field goal was short. It was. And, of course, Davis with that blazing speed, and he had a convoy of blockers. And, of course, we all know what happened after that. So, considering how Alabama lost the game, considering they went 12-1, they would probably get the number 3 seed. Number 4, Michigan State, because of their great defense, they went 12-1, won the Big Ten, and did so by handing Ohio State their only loss in regular season play while Urban Meyer was head coach, snapping that 24-game winning streak of the Buckeyes. 2 teams that would have been arguments last year for the playoff, but would have, in my opinion, not been included, would have been Baylor, who won the Big 12, had a great offense, had one of the highest scoring teams in the country, but non-conference schedule was weak, and their only loss, which was at Oklahoma State, they got embarrassed. They got blown out. And Stanford won the Pac-12, had wins over Notre Dame, Oregon, as well as UCLA, and did win the Pac-12 championship game on the road against Arizona State. But Stanford did have 2 losses, and they were both to unranked teams at the time, especially the head-scratching loss at Utah. The other one, by the way, was to USC when they made that coaching change after Lane Kiffin got axed just weeks before. So I think Stanford and Baylor would have had arguments, but would have been left out, and it would have been Florida State against Michigan State in one semifinal and another Auburn-Alabama game in the other, and that, I think, would have been the layout for the Final Four if this thing had taken place the year before. So there you have it right there. Just a reminder, this year it will be the Rose and it will be the Sugar that will host the semifinals. Next season, it will be the Orange and the Cotton Bowl's turn for the semis with the championship game in Glendale, Arizona, because they won the bidding rights for that. And the 2016 season, as the rotation will finish up for that cycle, 2016, it will be Glendale, Arizona for the semifinal in one game, the Chick-fil-A Peach in the other, and Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. They're not even a part of the New Year's Six, but they ended up winning the bids they will host the 2016 National Championship game. And one more side note, if you plan on going to any semifinal games or the National Championship game in particular, you better be prepared to pay a lot or have one heck of a credit line on your plastic, because it will be majorly expensive. Rumor is that the National Championship tickets alone are going to be no cheaper than about $300, and you can bet that those ticket agencies like StubHub have already bought those up. So unless you're a student at the university of one of those schools that's going to the National Championship game, you're going to be paying probably 5 to 6, 7 times the face value of those tickets. That's over $2,000, and that's just for the upper level seats at Jerry's World. So you're either going to be not getting great seats, or you might even be standing, and you might be better off just watching the game if you're going on that big 180 feet long Jumbotron, 60 yards long if you're looking at yardage. College football, this will be the funnest season as of yet, because it involves, as Jim Moore, as you heard him at the beginning, playoffs. Let the fun begin in just a few weeks. And throughout July, a reminder, we will have college football previews team by team. I'll get as many teams as I can. And in August, mid-August, we will preview Big 12 teams, including my Oklahoma Sooners. I'm expecting great things from them. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time as we'll begin my college football team by team previews. So long.